I can still remember the first time I realized my dad wouldn't be in the audience. I was 8, and it was my first school play. I had rehearsed my lines over and over, whispering them to my reflection in the mirror, imagining his proud smile in the front row. But when I turned toward the entrance of the auditorium, the seat that I had pictured him filling was empty. I waited, hoping he was just running late, and my chest tightened as the bell rang. The curtains rose, and the applause began. He never came. I thought maybe it was a one-time thing. Maybe he had an important meeting. Maybe he was sick. I didn't say anything. I smiled for my mom, for my teachers, for my classmates. I clapped, took my bows, and went home pretending I wasn't disappointed. But deep down, I felt it a hollow ache that no amount of applause could fill. That empty seat started to feel like a pattern, a quiet message that I was, somehow, invisible. Over the years, it didn't get better. Every play, every recital, every small performance I poured myself into, I would glance toward the front row, hopeful. And every year, I saw the same thing, the empty seat. My mom would apologize quietly, telling me that he was busy, that he had work, that it wasn't his fault. I tried to believe it. I really did. I wanted to trust him. I wanted to believe he loved me the way other dads loved their kids, the way I saw other fathers cheering, taking photos, and embracing their children afterward. By the time I was 16, I had stopped expecting him to show up. I learned to enjoy my own achievements quietly, to celebrate myself in small ways because the reality was too heavy to ignore. Still, a part of me held on to hope, a tiny, fragile thread that maybe one day he would show up. That thread was always fragile, fraying at the edges, but it never disappeared completely. What hurt the most wasn't that he missed the performances. It was the way he treated it when I mentioned them. Sometimes he would nod, smile faintly, and change the subject. Other times, he would say things like, "I've been busy, you know," or "Don't expect me to be everywhere." Each word, each excuse, felt like a small betrayal, a subtle message that my accomplishments, my hard work, and my excitement didn't matter enough for him to be present. I started noticing the little things, how he would brag about my younger brother's soccer games, how he would comment endlessly on my cousin's achievements, yet when I shared my success, he seemed distracted or disinterested. I learned to hold my joy close, to smile politely when he asked about school events, and to store the sting of disappointment deep inside. I didn't lash out, I didn't sulk, I just learned to endure, and yet, beneath the calm surface, the sadness never really left. I remember sitting on my bed one rainy afternoon, clutching the program from my latest recital, tears slipping silently down my cheeks. I whispered to no one in particular, "Why don't you care? Why can't you just be proud of me?" The house was quiet, empty of answers, empty of him. That was when I first realized that hope and hurt could exist in the same space, quietly gnawing at your heart. Still, I didn't hate him. I never hated him. I was young, and I still wanted him in my life. I wanted him to see me, to cheer for me, to be the father I imagined in my dreams. But I also started to notice the patterns, the small betrayals that built up over time. I began to understand that love without action, without presence, was complicated. It could hurt more than it healed, and even as I quietly endured, I promised myself that one day I would find a way to confront this silence, not with anger, but with truth and with dignity. That promise stayed with me, tucked away like a secret treasure, growing stronger with every empty seat, every muted celebration, every smile that hid a hidden pain. And as I stood backstage at my final high school play, waiting for the curtain to rise, I looked at the front row with a strange mix of hope and resolve. One day, I thought, one day he will see me, and he will understand. High school felt like a long series of performances, and every time I stepped onto the stage, I carried that quiet ache with me. I learned to hide it behind a practiced smile, to pour every ounce of myself into my lines, my songs, my movements. The applause at the end was always satisfying, yes, but it never quite filled the hollow space left by his absence. And the strange thing was, I had started noticing it even offstage. Every conversation, every gathering, every family event became a careful observation of where he was, how he reacted, and whether I even mattered in his world. It wasn't just the plays anymore. I watched him at birthdays, at recitals for my younger siblings, at simple dinners. He was always polite, kind even, but he was distant. He smiled, nodded, occasionally complimented, but it was never directed at me. My achievements seemed to pass him by, as though they were small, inconsequential things. I remember the night I won a small art competition. I had stayed up for weeks perfecting the piece, cutting and gluing and painting until my fingers were sore. I ran home after school, excited to show him the certificate and the painting itself. I found him in the living room, reading the newspaper, coffee in hand. "Dad," I exclaimed, holding it out to him, heart pounding. "Look, I won." He looked up briefly, smiled faintly, and said, "That's nice, honey." Then he went back to the paper. That was it. That was all. I had imagined a hug, a high five, maybe a proud comment. Instead, I got a polite nod. I wanted to cry right there in the living room, but I didn't. I learned, even then, to swallow my disappointment and tuck it away. By the time I turned 18, I had internalized this absence so completely that it became a part of my identity. I became a quiet achiever, someone who worked hard but expected little recognition from him. I shared my wins with friends, with my mother, with teachers who cheered for me, but the person whose approval I craved most remained a distant figure. And yet the pain never completely disappeared. It would appear in the quiet moments watching him at a school function, smiling and congratulating other kids while I clutched my own program, hearing about him asking about my younger siblings, soccer games, tennis matches, and academic awards, seeing him interact with other parents' children with warmth I longed for. I felt like a ghost in my own life, present yet unseen, existing in plain sight but never fully acknowledged. The turning point came slowly, through observation rather than confrontation. I began noticing patterns in his behavior, not just the absence, but the avoidance. Whenever I brought up something I had worked on, he would redirect the conversation, comment vaguely, or offer a platitude that felt rehearsed. There was a subtle, almost unconscious disregard that spoke louder than any words. And as I grew older, I realized that no amount of begging, hoping, or performing would change that. It wasn't rage that took hold. It was clarity. I started to see him not just as my father, but as a person with limits, distractions, priorities, and choices. He could love, yes, but his love had boundaries I couldn't control. I began to understand that waiting for him to see me, to acknowledge me, to feel pride in me, was a trap I didn't need to stay in. I learned to celebrate myself quietly, to honor my own achievements without his validation, and, most importantly, to protect my heart from the sting of his indifference. I also learned the power of silence. There was no shouting, no confrontations, no public shaming. I simply watched, observed, and kept my feelings close. I began to notice subtle things, how his attention wandered, how he smiled more brightly at accomplishments that weren't mine, how he avoided looking directly at my face when I spoke about my successes. The truth settled in gently, like snow covering a landscape. It was undeniable but quiet. And yet there was still hope, not for his validation, but for my own voice. I realized that someday I could confront the absence, but not with anger, not with blame. I would do it with calm, with clarity, and with dignity. I would allow him to see me fully, all at once, and he could finally recognize the person he had quietly neglected for so many years. That thought became a quiet promise I carried with me through every practice, every rehearsal, every moment backstage. By the time I graduated, I had become both gentle and strong, soft and unyielding. I had learned to endure without bitterness, to recognize pain without letting it define me, and to hold my heart with care. And when the time came for my final school play, the one I had been saving this thought for, I knew it would be different. I didn't yet know exactly how, but I knew that the empty seat would not remain empty forever. By the time my final high school play approached, I had spent years collecting quiet disappointment and hidden pain, storing them in a place no one could see. I had learned to celebrate my achievements quietly, to smile and thank those who supported me, and to accept that some people, no matter how close, might never show the recognition we crave. And yet, in the quiet corners of my heart, a small, stubborn hope lingered. A hope that my father could finally witness the person I had grown into. I wrestled with the idea for weeks. Should I even invite him? Was it fair to expect him to change after years of absence? Could I risk feeling hurt again, standing in the wings while he found another excuse not to appear? I imagined the curtain rising, the audience filling the auditorium and his seat. Would it be empty again? The thought made my stomach twist, but another thought, brighter and steadier, pulled at me. Maybe it was time to see him, not to beg for approval, but to show him what he had been missing all these years. I finally decided to send the invitation, not in anger, not with accusation, just as a simple, quiet gesture. I typed the message carefully. Dad, I'm performing in my final school play. I would like you to come. It's important to me, no pressure, just if you're able. I stared at it for several minutes before hitting send. My fingers trembled, but my heart felt strangely light. I wasn't demanding anything. I wasn't expecting a miracle. I was simply offering him the chance to witness my life, the way I had longed for him to do. The next few days were tense. He didn't respond immediately. I tried not to dwell on it, reminding myself that my value wasn't tied to his attendance. I focused on rehearsals, on perfecting my lines, on moving through the emotions of my character. Yet every time I glanced at the front row, I imagined his face there, hopeful, longing, nervous, maybe even a little guilty. I realized that part of me wanted him to feel something, not for me, but for himself. After all, this wasn't about revenge, it was about truth. Finally, a reply arrived, I'll be there. 2 simple words, yet they carried an ocean of unspoken history. I didn't celebrate. I didn't jump up in joy. I simply nodded to myself, recognizing that this was not a moment of triumph, but an opportunity for acknowledgement, a chance for clarity. I spent the next evening preparing mentally, rehearsing not just my lines, but the way I would hold myself, the quiet strength I would carry, the dignity I would embody. The day of the play arrived, and I could feel the tension in my chest, a mixture of nerves and anticipation. Backstage, I paced quietly, listening to the murmur of the audience, the rustle of programs, the applause for the acts before mine. And then I saw him. His presence was unmistakable, hesitantly scanning the crowd, settling into a seat near the center. He looked older, a little uncertain, almost afraid. I realized that he didn't know what to expect either. As the curtain rose, I stepped onto the stage and let myself breathe fully into the performance. Every line, every movement, every expression carried years of practice, yes, but also years of longing, of hope, and of silent endurance. I wasn't performing to impress him anymore. I was performing to honor myself, to show that absence had not diminished me, had not broken me. I could feel his eyes on me, the quiet weight of recognition settling over the rows between us, and it made my heart pound. not with fear, but with calm, steady truth. By the end of the first act, I noticed something I hadn't anticipated. He was crying. Not loudly, not with dramatics, but quietly, his head tilted slightly, a hand pressed to his mouth, eyes fixed on me. I didn't feel triumph. I didn't feel satisfaction. I felt something quieter, something deeper, relief. Relief that the truth of my presence, my growth, and my strength was finally visible. Relief that I could hold my dignity, my pride, and my heartbreak in a single, calm gaze without needing to explain or plead. In that moment, I understood that this was not about punishment or revenge. It was about visibility, about being seen without compromise, about honoring my own journey. And as I moved through the rest of the performance, I carried that knowledge like a soft, steady light. I had endured, I had grown, and I had invited him to witness it, not to change him, but to honor myself. The auditorium smelled of polished wood and theater lights, a familiar scent that always made my heart race. Backstage, I felt the quiet hum of anticipation. The cast around me chattered nervously, but I moved through it with a calm focus, the years of rehearsals and performances grounding me. I didn't think about him, not in panic, not in longing, but I did feel the weight of his presence waiting quietly in the front row. When the curtain rose, I stepped onto the stage and let the lights wash over me. I had spent so many years imagining this moment, not with bravado or vindication, but with the hope of being seen, fully and without compromise. Every word I spoke carried the subtle energy of years spent waiting, watching, and understanding. Every gesture held a quiet dignity, a proof that absence had not hollowed me out, had not defined me. I was whole and I was present in a way that didn't need permission. I could feel him immediately. His gaze was fixed on me, eyes wide, shoulders slightly hunched as though he were leaning into a truth that had taken him too long to recognize. And then I saw it. Tears silently forming at the corners of his eyes, tracing paths down his cheeks, a mix of regret, realization, and an emotional weight I had carried for years. He didn't speak. He didn't reach out. He didn't attempt to explain or justify. He simply watched, and in that silent observation, I realized that sometimes acknowledgement doesn't need words. Sometimes recognition is a quiet, shared moment of truth. As the play unfolded, I moved through it fully, letting my character's emotions mirror my own, but with clarity, with self-possession, and with grace. I wasn't performing for him. I was performing for myself, for the years I had spent building, learning, and enduring. And yet I could sense that he was moved in a way that was honest, a way that could not be undone by excuses or distraction. The empty seat of my childhood had finally been replaced not perfectly, but visibly, with a witness to my growth. When the final act ended and the audience rose in applause, I felt a quiet calm settle over me. I stepped to the edge of the stage, bowed, and glanced toward the front row. He remained seated for a moment longer than most, hands clenched softly, eyes still glistening. Then, almost imperceptibly, he wiped his face and nodded. It was a gesture so simple, so understated, yet it carried more weight than any elaborate apology could have. In that nod, I understood that he had seen me, fully and without judgment, and that recognition alone was enough. Backstage, the cast celebrated, but I moved quietly to the side, collecting my thoughts. My father approached slowly, careful not to overwhelm, careful not to speak too soon. I didn't need drama. I didn't need excuses. I simply allowed him to stand there, a presence I had longed for, and offered him my calm. He looked at me, searching, as if trying to measure the distance between us, the years of absence, the small betrayals, the silent endurance. I smiled softly, not triumphantly, not accusingly, just a simple acknowledgement of everything we had both endured. "Your performance," he began, voice quiet, unsteady. "I'm proud of you. I didn't need more. I didn't need to hear him list apologies or explain why he hadn't been there before. The simple words were enough, and I realized that the years of waiting had not been wasted. They had built a version of me capable of receiving recognition without losing my dignity, capable of holding both my disappointment and my strength in the same heart. That night, I left the theater with a quiet sense of completion. I didn't feel the weight of bitterness, nor the need for revenge. Instead, I carried a soft, steady light of self-respect, of boundaries honored, of pain transformed into strength. The lesson was clear. Absence does not define your value, silence does not diminish your worth, and recognition, whether given immediately or delayed, is never as powerful as the acknowledgement you grant yourself. As we walked to the car, side by side yet in our own space, I realized something important. The real victory wasn't in making him see me, it was in finally seeing myself. And in that quiet truth, I understood what dignity truly meant. Not the applause of others, but the unwavering calm of a heart that has endured, observed, and emerged stronger.